Welcome to The Back Pass, a podcast for sports nerds by sports nerds. This week, drama, heartbreak, controversy. We're not talking about VAR. We're going to look ahead to the knockout stages of the World Cup. Hello and welcome to the Back Pass. I'm your host Gurpreet Singh Rana, and with me today I have Ali, Kevin, and Mike. Hello, gentlemen.
How's it going?
Good evening.
How are we not going to talk about VAR?
What about notes? Can we talk about notes?
Well, let's try and get through 30 to 40 minutes of football without mentioning VAR, lads. Ali, I'm going to pick on you first. The knockout stages got underway this morning, New Zealand time, with the Dutch and Argentina winning. What did you make of the opening two games?
I think if you are not a soccer person, football person, and you saw the results, you wouldn't be very surprised. You'd expect the Dutch and Argentina to win those. Argentina were really up and down. Australia really pushed them. The score kind of, the final score doesn't really show how close it was to potentially slipping out of Argentina's hands, but and also the goals that Argentina did score weren't really something kind of like that came out of beautiful passing or sweeping moves that Australia couldn't stop. So it was a really interesting game and interesting result out of that, because Argentina looked fluid at times, but when they did, Australia had answers of how to stop them. It's just Australia kind of almost let themselves down. The Dutch looked good. They poured forward. They really put a lot of pressure on USA, and USA seemed to be kind of didn't have the answers for it. So that one went more as expected, as what the scoreline kind of a little bit represents.
Kevin, let's focus a little bit on the Argentina-Australia game. Now you're the resident Aussie on the panel. What did you make of the Aussie effort?
Look, it was expected. I mean, the play style matches, what we've done in the knockouts, the group stages, and even in qualification. I think that the second goal is probably a true reflection of who we are as a team. Ryan at the back, looking to get the ball out, had indecision because there was press at that particular moment. He wasn't certain that the player that he was about to give the ball to was going to be able to get it, and then he made the mistake. And that's probably it's the truth of the matter. Like, we have talent in key areas, but then the drop off in talent in other areas is significant, and it's what separates us from probably that elite level of competition. Harry Suter has been one of the best defenders in the competition, but if you look at the other defenders, we're prone to catastrophic lapses in concentration, and that was the case. And that's the difference between when you get to the knockout stage. That's the difference. That's the difference between quality teams and that step below. And if we want to progress further, we need to have a probably more even spectrum of talent. Hopefully this can be a stepping stone into the future.
I know Ali made the point on WhatsApp when Australia equalized. When they scored, not equalized, when they scored the goal that made it 2-1. The way the game panned out after Australia got that goal and came back into the game, it kind of magnified how bad that era was. When that second goal first went in, you were sort of like, okay, this is expected. Argentina were going to win anyway. But the way Australia came back in the last 30, like Ali said on the chat, that mistake really decided the game.
Yep.
And it
And
was, yeah. Did Ryan not get a call? Like he didn't. Was not aware there was a man on the other side
no,
behind
you
him.
could see the indecision, right? On his, like, you could tell by the way he was moving. He was like, "Oh crap! If I give him the ball, I'm not sure if if it's going to be taken off him." He probably at that point should have just cleared.
Yep.
Um, but again, it's if he had options, if he had better players out the back, they would have probably found space and not put him under pressure to make that decision.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when you're 1-0 down, you're trying to play positive. So it's a whole bunch of things that came together really.
Mike, we saw something similar in the first game where the Dutch played the US. Uh, like the Australia Argentina game, it was 2-0, and then the US scored a goal. There was a moment there where the Dutch were looking very anxious, and then catastrophic defending on the back post, and the Dutch make it 3-1. Do you think this is going to be a theme through these knockout stages where it's going to come down to moments of catastrophic defending?
Yeah, I guess quite possibly you'll start to see a bit more of that as big games as you progress through the knockout stages are often won on lost on defences and how well they can step up. So if um, in group stages where it might be a bit more open, less riding on the line, a mistake is probably going to be less crucial. And because the fact it is less crucial, you could argue it's less likely to happen because it's not going to weigh on the minds of those players. So, and if it does happen in a knockout game, you have to wonder how that impacts that player and the team throughout the rest of the match, particularly if it, say, happens early on.
Mm.
So, I think we'll definitely see a bit of that. Yeah, really curious to see, for example, how the English defence goes against Senegal. So, and
I
there's a
like how
few others.
you transition from like mistakes in defense and straight to the England defense, and then let's talk about England.
I, I, I
Yeah.
was I was just gonna say this is probably the only time we've had Harry mentioned on the show, and we're not talking about Maguire. We're talking about Harry Suter.
Yeah, I think during the week the Ghana Parliament did enough talking uh, for us to talk about Mr. Maguire. Um, but yeah, my concern, typically my concern in the past has been with England is about failing to score goals in these
Mm,
big games,
mm,
and
Mm.
I probably don't have as much concern about that as I might have before. Thinking from an English supporter point of view. Um, and that's primarily because they've got options now, options that
Mm.
didn't necessarily exist in the past. When you can bring on the likes of Rashford or Madison, Grealish to an extent, Foden, there's a bit more variety there in attack. For me, it's really the defence and how well that goes when they start playing better teams. And we have to be honest, without dwelling too long on England, they had a pretty soft pull
Mm.
compared to
mm,
some of the other
mm,
teams that they'll be
Yep.
coming up against.
Yep.
I also, Mike, it's interesting you mentioned like England have a lot of variety on the bench. It's just, do they use it? You have to use it for it to
Hmm.
actually be any use to have the variety on the bench.
I, I
Yeah,
feel like this is leading into something.
And tactically speaking as well, I think Southgate is usually quite conservative in important matches and in knockout matches in particular. So probably looking at like a drab display and then putting a whole bunch of forwards on, or a whole bunch of his star forwards on that he thinks can get him a goal in the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes to try to get that win.
So what you're saying is that we can't expect Rashi to play any minutes in this knockout. Um,
Uh, yeah, yeah.
we're looking at a Sterling
Oh,
Kane front.
goodness me.
Yeah, it looks like that. It looks like control the game for 60 minutes. If you get a goal, if Harry Kane scores, great. If not, Harry Kane and Sterling get on the board, great. If not, then after 60 minutes, introduce the pace, introduce a bit more creativity, and win it with others tiring.
And Ali, I think look, I'm gonna go to XG again because that's literally the only thing I'm here for. But what you've described as the XG numbers back this up. So there was a brilliant write-up on The Athletic earlier today where they were looking at the different phases of
We
the
are not
game, and
sponsored by the Athletic. Just
we are
FYI.
not sponsored by The Athletic. We
No,
just
no, no.
we've all just jumped on the dollar a year subscription offer that was made available, and yeah, that's literally how we're prepping for these shows. But what the article described was how the XG lines up during the course of, on average, of these matches. And as we've seen while watching these games, basically the first 30 minutes tends to be very shallow in terms of expected goals, and then in the second half, particularly after the 60th minute, you can see a clear increase in XG. Now, logic suggests that's going to continue. In fact, that is pretty much what happened in that Argentina-Australia game. The first 30 minutes, uh, I actually think Australia did brilliantly. They managed the first 30 minutes brilliantly, and there was almost a momentary lapse in concentration for Messi to
Mm.
score, and then it was a different game thereafter. Do we think that pattern continues, or, and coming back to the point you've just made on Southgate, is the onus on certain teams against the smaller nations? So I'm talking about England playing Senegal, particularly Spain playing Morocco. Is the onus on these bigger sides to come out in those first 30 minutes and really put the foot down?
Is there any self-preservation there, you reckon? Like, again, coming back to what we were talking about when this tournament was about to kick off, weather, lack of training time, lack of cohesion, is all of these things going to come into, well, we don't want to show our hand, so we're just going to do the bare minimum to scrape through. To me, there's a chance of that actually happening, because that's what happened in the group stages. So you might see, for instance, a 2-1 Morocco game, Spain to Morocco, or a 1-1 draw in that scenario where they're 1-0 up in the 60th to 70th minute, and Morocco gets a fluke in, and then it goes into penalties. There is a chance, because of the competition, there's a chance that this could buck the trend completely as well.
But Spain has had the World Cup of diminishing returns so far, hasn't it? They've started with
true.
the 7-0. They started smashing out of the blocks, and then they've just kind of got a 1-1 draw and then a loss. So you don't know what's going to turn up against Morocco. Is it like, everyone knows how Spain are going to play now, and they're easy to contain.
Yeah. So for me, I'm sure you're all familiar with the boxing expression "styles makes fights." Now, I think you'll start to see a bit of that with this World Cup. Particularly, I think we've mentioned off air around the number of African and Asian teams making it. Now, these are not necessarily games that feature in competitive fixtures all that often, because they may play the odd friendly, but as we know, friendlies aren't really worth all that much. It's more a chance just for managers to test out things and keep their players fit. It's really about competitive fixtures, and I'd just like to maybe draw attention to, say, Japan, and if we look at their contrasting fortunes through their group stage, so they start off with a win to Germany. Germany dominated possession, and I think we've already discussed Germany had a much higher expected goals ratio, and I think Japan rode their luck to some extent in the first half. But then if we go into the Costa Rica game, Japan actually dominated possession, and then they go on and lose that game, I think conceding to the only single shot that Costa Rica had on goal. And then we flip it to the Spain game, which they go on and win. I think Spain had 82% of the possession.
That's right.
So Japan, you could argue, are a team that likes not having the ball, and they do a lot of their work without the ball and getting themselves into positions where they can quickly press and put pressure against the other team. So I wonder, and I had a quick look at Croatia, who they're coming up against next. Their kind of stats, and they seem to generally have around half the possession. It depends who they come up against. They're not a team that necessarily dominates possession, but I think the only game that they didn't have possession in their favour was the Morocco game at the start, which was a 0-0. So let's say if things kind of go to plan and Croatia does take 60 to 70% of the possession, does that actually, say, play into Japan's hands? And does Croatia know how to deal with that? And perhaps you might have a similar kind of thing on the Morocco game. So just curious to know what others think around how these teams match up and the familiarity of dealing with the different styles.
I mean, if we look at the possession numbers, so of the 7 sides with the lowest amount of possession through the group stages, 4 of them have actually made the knockouts. So not having possession is being a side who is more direct and not holding on to the ball as much as, say, Spain or England do, isn't necessarily been a disadvantage to this point. Although perhaps a counter argument to that is this World Cup has also, to your point, Mike, seen the biggest number of reversals between the first and the second game. So um, almost 30% of games have seen a reversal where a team has either won and then lost or lost and then gone on to win, which is kind of, it's just speaking to how crazy this tournament has been, where things have just been so unpredictable. And then, Mike, you made the point off air. What we saw in that final round was a whole bunch of sides who had won the first 2 games, making changes, and then adding to the absolute chaos where you'd expect a Brazil and a France to win that final game, but they end up losing. So
Yeah.
I'm actually saying we don't have an awful lot to judge on based on these group stages because of how much turmoil we've seen.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there will be. I did predict Netherlands and Argentina to win, and as Ali touched on, I think those would be the results most people would have been pretty comfortable would happen. But I'm also very confident there will be at least 2 more upsets of the remaining 6 games. Which ones they'll be, I'm not sure. If I had to have a guess, I'd fancy, say, Switzerland over Portugal, and then either Morocco over Spain or Japan over Croatia. But you know, there's so many of these are on a flip of a coin, really.
I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate that Gurpreet just mentioned England in the team with high possession, play with a lot of possession. That's such a rare comment, and it's something that's just completely. If you said this to someone like 12 years ago, they'd be like, "What are you on about?"
Yeah, it's Ali. Do you remember that little period where when Louis van Gaal was in charge of United, and the first 2 months were beautiful. We saw some of the most beautiful football, and then there was that loss to Leicester, and Louis van Gaal became this kind of like, it was this dystopian vision of what possession football could become, where it's just you've got 60% of the ball, but 80% of your passes are sideways. I think Southgate's kind of taken that to a whole new level through his general tenure, except when Marcus Rashford is on the field.
The only problem is that Southgate doesn't have a Marwan Fellaini.
And no, he doesn't. He doesn't. There's no long ball merchant to hoof the ball up to, unless of course you play Harry Maguire up front,
Which you never know, could happen.
which you never know.
That might be his best position if you really, the way he's playing right now. If you put him up, maybe not right up to the front, but let's say attacking midfield, he might be able to do some damage.
Okay, Jen. So we've had 19 minutes. We've had 19 minutes to warm up. We've got to move past this segment and start talking about the players. I'm going to come to each of you, and based on what you've seen so far, you've had plenty of time. I know you've all watched plenty of football. Who do you see making it to the final? We'll go left to right. Mr. Coolum, we'll come to you first. Who makes the final based on what you've seen so far?
So I'm just having a look at the draw bracket, just to make sure who we've got there. So we think on the left side, you'd think Argentina or Brazil, between one of those two. I just have a feeling it's going to be Argentina.
You don't think the Dutch have it over Argentina? I don't know. They seem more
Yeah,
cohesive.
I was about to say that
They
Dutch
seem more
team
cohesive over the Argentinians.
Yeah, I'd agree with Ali. I'm not confident Argentina get past the Dutch, eh?
Yeah,
It's gonna be a good match.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a good watch.
The reason I'm not confident about Holland is I just don't think they've had a soft group, and you could also argue that USA was pretty soft. I haven't seen enough from them to really know how they will go under pressure, and I think that is going to be an interesting tie, but yeah, for me, Argentina on that side. And then on the other side, it's hard to look past France. But if I was going to throw a dark horse in there, they're not attractive by any stretch, but they're very effective, and that's Switzerland. They seem to be able to grind out results. Against Serbia, they were conceding goals, but they were being counter-punching almost instantaneously. And they just seem to have quite a well-balanced side now. Obviously, a tough game against Portugal, and I think that's a 50-50 game. But yeah, just let's throw a bit of a different prediction than I think others will say. So I'm going to put Argentina, Switzerland into the final.
Wow.
Interesting
Whoa.
call.
Kevin, can you better that?
I'm gonna try. Okay, so Argentina, watching them play against Australia, I don't think they have another gear. And Netherlands certainly did have another gear against the USA.
Agree.
So I think that semi-final is going to be one of Netherlands. And you were talking about before about teams without possession and how well they play. Japan and South Korea are two teams that play well without possession. If I was looking at an upset, one of those two going through to reach the semi-finals is not, at least from a percentage play, there's a chance that they could make the semis, and then who knows what could happen. So I'm looking at Netherlands in the final if I'm playing the odds from that left-hand side of the group. The right-hand side of the group, my hope is that the cup comes home and England makes it all the way through.
Oh, I like this. I like this.
There's some heat on it.
And here's my thinking. I think Southgate is playing a game of poker, and that team that he fenced out in that first game is the strategy that he's going to go forward with. And you're going to see Rashi on the field, and he's going to score a couple of goals with Saka and the young generation of English, forwards and strikers is going to come through, and they're going to perform well, and we're going to see an England and Netherlands final.
Kevin, I asked you to go bold, and predicting Southgate to go with a young generation and play open, free-flowing football, I think is probably more drastic than Mike picking Switzerland to make the final. Ali, can you better the previous two?
Man, it just like when Kevin was talking, it just whet my appetite. If Japan and Korea both win their round of 16 match. And if we get a Japan-Korea quarterfinal, like that would be crazy. From that half, I feel like Brazil and Netherlands are the two sides that would be strong. I think Brazil have enough to get past Korea, South Korea. If Brazil can get past, like Croatia would be a different challenge, and then Japan another different challenge, but I think Brazil have enough know-how and street smarts to scrape past and get past them. So I feel like it'll come down to Netherlands, Brazil, and I think if you had to look at Netherlands versus Brazil, I think Brazil win that. So I'd say one finalist. I would say Brazil. Not a shock surprise, right? Like everyone's been tipping Brazil to kind of go from very start of the tournament. Uh, on the other side, I really think Morocco can make a deep run. I feel like they can at least get into the quarters, and if not, actually look at a semi-final, because if they get past Spain, they're potentially looking at a Portugal or Switzerland in the quarterfinal, which I think they can match if they turn up and they've been playing with the defense and their forwards the way they've been going. I think they could match them. They could make the semis, and then we're looking at a potential England France. How does that pan out? Obviously, that's the big question mark. Like that's almost good enough to be a final. England
It
France,
is.
I think,
It is.
Yeah.
and that's gonna happen in the quarters. It's gonna be tight, and you know, I really want England to win that. So let's just pretend that they are, and we could potentially see an England Morocco semi-final, which I'm hoping England grind out, and we might see an England Brazil final.
Wow. It's all adding up to it coming home, lads.
Can I just quickly chime in on South Korea? Admittedly, I didn't watch all of their games, but for me, they snuck into the semi-final almost on the back of other poor results from other teams, and the fact that Portugal put a weaker side. Obviously, Bruno wasn't playing unless he came on for a few minutes. I didn't catch the end of that, but yeah, what had they done before that almost did rubber for Portugal? I think they had a loss to
And a
Ghana, was it?
draw.
And they in a draw.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have to say I'd be absolutely shocked if somehow Korea get a result against Brazil. That if we're going to talk about any result that would shock us, for me that would probably shock me the most. But yeah.
But Mike, if we could just pause there, I think this next segment that I wanted to move on to was players that need to step up. So as we've seen with your predictions, I love the color. I love the fact that there's no consensus and it's all over the place, and we've got all these different permutations. But let's focus on Brazil, because as Ali said, you know, of course we can't predict this in any absolute way. But looking at that sort of the top half of the draw, you've got to say Brazil are heavy favourites to make it. The big concern for Brazil is they topped that group, but they scored the least amount of goals.
Hmm.
Can they turn that around? And if so, who are the players that need to step up? Because they're stacked with talent, but we're not seeing anything cohesive in attack. They have not. There's not been a single game where they've torn the opposition apart. Where, you know, I'd even say in that first game, the 2-0 against Serbia, both those goals had pretty low XG. So where do the
And
goals come from?
That's the part I actually like about Brazil in this World Cup, is that they haven't. It's not just been, watch our flair forwards, just do all the work, and we'll win the games just because we're super talented strikers who can do all sorts of things. They've actually they have a solid base.
Yes.
They defend well. They Thiago Silva, jeez, he's still running things beautifully. They have Casemiro in the middle, pulling the strings, and they have like 9 strikers who they can pick and choose. And the positive is they have the quality that they only need to create one chance or one half chance to get a goal, and that's kind of what they've been counting on. They've keeping all the other areas solid, and they're getting the goals. They don't have to be free flowing traditional Brazil football.
Just on that, the matchup, that's very interesting what you just said, because I feel the same way, but there's slightly negative tint in my rose-coloured glasses. I think that could be their downfall. They're positioned maybe to get that one goal, but that also puts them in a position where they're not going to blow other teams out of the water. And Croatia and Japan, forget South Korea, but Croatia and Japan are teams that if it's close, they can do some damage. They have quality,
Agree.
enough quality. So it's probably not a great matchup for them. If they were playing, somebody a little bit more looser like Senegal, I think it would have been, I'd almost call them favourites with a margin. But against Japan or Croatia, it could be anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd agree with that too. And yeah, just to come back to that Korea game, I think that will be almost a formality for Brazil, and I think whoever gets through that Croatia-Japan game will be quite battle-hardened after that one, and they could catch Brazil a little bit cold. And also, just on the Brazil point, I'd be curious to know who kind of comes into the side with, obviously, is it injuries, I think, to Neymar still and Jesus?
Neymar's back in training today. I think I saw some footage on Instagram where he was, hitting some ridiculous volleys, but I'm not sure he's fit enough to start in 2 days' time.
Yeah.
And so, Jesus is out for the World Cup.
Jesus is out.
Is he gone out?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So for me, even though they didn't get the win against Cameroon, who really impressed me was Martinelli. I think he had a number of great attempts, and it was only the Cameroonian keeper or the bar that I think stopped them going in. So if you're asking about who from Brazil I think would need to step up and really announce themselves on the world stage for Brazil to have an impact, I'd throw Martinelli's name in there.
We're talking about players that need to step up. Can we talk about a player that should have stepped up? And just going back to the group stage, I'm going to talk about Romelu Lukaku.
Oh, out.
What a shocker! That was probably.
But is anyone surprised though?
I
can't explain it.
I think Gurpreet would.
What was the XG for that game?
Gurpreet would know this better, but for the 30 minutes or so that Lukaku was on the field in that final game, his XG, just his alone XG, was I think 1.4, and not the rest of the team.
Yeah.
Just his 30 minutes, 1.4, from those 4 shots that he had, and it was just like, wow, that was He was injured, how much training did he have? How much he clearly needed more game time, more practice, but.
So Kevin, tell me this. What is more annoying, Lukaku missing those sitters, or acting like he's surprised after missing them?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think if I was a Belgium fan, because you'd have to be optimistic about your team regardless of where they play or how they play. I'd be on the missing the sitters, but just couldn't they have passed it to somebody else?
I mean,
after the first one.
I mean, it just seems
somebody else.
It just seems like every time the camera goes on him, he's doing the. It's like no, that wasn't even close. It literally came off your backside. You could have hit it anywhere, but you hit it right to the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
I think we're being a bit rough. I think we're being a bit harsh on Lukaku. He was a bit undercooked coming into the World Cup. Obviously, he was because he missed the first 2 games, and you can't blame Belgium getting bundled out on Lukaku, and Martinez didn't have a plan B.
Can I just say,
not having Lukaku?
Shout out to the Man United, whoever runs our transfer business, for us to actually sell him for £70 million. And also, we'll come to Mike in a second, but shout out to Chelsea for then paying £120 million to bring him back to the Premiership. Mike.
Yeah, I mean, the Chelsea striker business over the years is not made for good reading, has it? I think Lukaku came in, I think was it just after Chelsea had won the Champions League.
Yeah.
And he actually hit the ground running pretty well. I think in the first 4 or 5 games
Yep.
he had 3 or 4 goals.
Looked amazing.
And then he got injured, and he was out for about seven game weeks or something like that. And after he came back from injury, there was just no sign of any form he had pre-injury returning. And I can only put it down to mentality of the player. Really, and it's only certain managers can really coax certain players into getting results. Obviously, Antonio Conte did extremely good things with him beforehand, and maybe if he was to be having worked under Conte again, he would be getting good results. But yeah, certain players respond differently to certain managers, and yeah, the money side of things. I mean, we spent 70 million on Kepa, so let's not dwell too much on spending 100 on a striker.
I mean, I was trying to wind you up, but as you tend to do, you actually made a very articulate point in there. Lukaku does this where when he's out of form, he's just bang out of form, right? And we know he had an injury, Kevin. The decision from Martinez to bring him on in that last 30 minutes when their entire campaign hung off it, with Hazard on the field and the form that Hazard's in, with a squad that's lacking unity, that's surely it's not just Lukaku. The Belgian management has to take a lot of the blame for this.
But you got to also think about this. KDB in that last that middle section was just absolutely on fire. If it was any striker in the competition, I think they would have put that through. Any other striker. In fact, I think it didn't even need to be a striker. It could have been just like an attacking
Harry
mid.
Maguire.
Maguire could have put it through.
I completely look, the part of the problem and part that Roberto Martinez kind of cornered himself into was that he didn't really have a realistic alternative to Lukaku in his game plans.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
He did not have it for like. I mean, realistically, he could have just taken Christian Benteke and put Christian Benteke on, and Benteke would have scored. Yeah. Benteke would have scored at least one of those, right? There were options. It's not like Belgium don't have these strikers. There were options that are similar or play it in a similar, maybe not as good as Lukaku, whatever that is. There are players that would have played in a similar style to Lukaku that they could have still played with while Lukaku was recovering and getting match fit.
And again, look, I'm sort of the resident geek on attackers pressing high, and I think so much of what worked really well for Martinez down the years was having a front three that pressed. Now with Hazard in the type of form that he's in, and Lukaku, who's never been a great presser, I think you kind of went from having two of the front three that could press really well to having two that didn't press at all. And I think that completely changed the dynamic of this team. They almost lost intensity. And it was just KDB up there by himself doing the pressing, right? Their press became disjointed. It was just... And I think it was Mike that called us out on WhatsApp, but we saw how easily Canada played through them, and they played through their press, right? And Canada should really have won that first game, based purely on XG. They should have won that game, and the writing was on the wall at that point that something wasn't working, and the Morocco result was, it was shocking, but really based on that Canadian performance, we saw it coming, and then they had to get it all right against Croatia, and we know Croatia are such an awkward team to play against, right? They almost put that choke on you where they deny you off the ball, and you're going to get a few chances, and you're going to have to get it right. And I think what we saw was just a stagnation that set in about 2 years ago.
Yeah, and just on that with Lukaku, he, I don't know if you'd seen the previous results between Croatia and Belgium, but Belgium had all the recent head-to-head wins over Croatia, and in every game that Belgium had won, Lukaku had scored. So there was history there, but that's basically the theme that I think we saw with Belgium, is that they were dining out on past glories.
Mm.
So whether that's being Hazard, maybe Alderweireld,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
whoever, you have to pick the informed players. You can't pick players that were great 4 years ago.
yeah.
Yep.
So do we think that that's a strategy for the knockout stages? The teams that have gone through, they've picked informed players. In which case, you look at somebody like Portugal or even England. We would we everybody knows what we think about England, who they should start, but who should Port be starting in this scenario? Should they bring on? Should they keep the young guys on? To get through against, assuming they get through against Switzerland, if they're playing Spain, how do they strategize this? How do they?
Yeah, I think with Portugal, like the situation is such that they still built around Ronaldo. The team is still centered for Ronaldo, and they work for Ronaldo. It's just not the same. It wasn't the same at Manchester United, where they were like, we were not going to build around Ronaldo. But for Portugal, they're not planning for the next 4 years. They're planning for this World Cup, and they've gone, we are still going to build around our greatest ever player and make sure that he can bang us goals, because realistically, other than Yao Felix, they don't really have a center forward that can do what Ronaldo does, even at 37. So they've gone, he's a spearhead. We just have to make him get the best out of him in the way that he can, and everyone else has to just pull together for like 5 games and do the work, and then after the World Cup, after he retires, we'll create a new game plan.
I think they have the personnel, Ali, and I accept your point that they are built around Ronaldo. There's no denying that. But I actually feel they have the personnel where they could play a style quite similar to City pre Erling Haaland, where you've got the likes of Diego Jota, who can play right across that front three. You've got Rafa Leao, who I think is actually a brilliant outlet for them.
Yep.
You've got Bernardo Silva, who again, he can play deep, he can play wide, he can play as a false nine, and I think running the show, you've got Ruben Neves and Bruno Fernandes, and I don't think chance creation is going to be a problem for them.
No.
I actually think on paper, and then you've got their amazing wingbacks, right? So Dalot, Cancelo. I think on paper they've actually got the potential to be one of the most dynamic, fluid attacks. But I almost think, and I know Kevin's raised this point a number of times. It's almost the case of where Ronaldo is holding that attack back. Now, I like England and Harry Kane. I don't think the two managers are going to take the step and drop their sort of record goal scorers. But it almost seems to be the thing that's holding these two teams back. And I do wonder if both these teams through the course of this comp find themselves 1-0 down, right? And the heat starts to kick in. Is the decision then to withdraw a Harry Kane or a Cristiano Ronaldo and go for the more athletic players and for the more dynamic front line? I don't think these managers are big enough to make that call, but I do think this is the weak point for both of them. And look,
I'd agree.
taking nothing away from Harry Kane, but I think again the stats back this up. There is an issue there with Harry Kane, right? It's he's getting the assists, but and it may well be that ankle. He's not getting on the end of those chances like Ronaldo isn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who would you put? Okay, so just on the Portugal side of things, yeah, I actually think that could be Portugal's downfall, this persisting with Ronaldo, and that's why I kind of think that Switzerland has got a bit of a interesting route into the final there if they can get past Portugal.
Yeah, just that, Portugal can play, that front three the way Liverpool and City kind of set up, and they made it work with they have plenty of skill and talent there. I actually just think Portugal like and they build that they really their sole focus is that Ronaldo at
Oh,
that fulcrum and
Oh
no,
yeah,
no,
playing
no
off
doubt,
him.
no doubt.
It's just they're not gonna. I
Yeah,
don't see them. I don't see them winning.
no,
They
no,
want him there. They want his experience there.
yeah,
but do other teams kind of use that knowledge that that's how they're going to play, and then basically formulate a game plan
correct,
against that?
correct.
Because
Yeah.
I do suspect if they kind of put a surprise on Switzerland saying Ronaldo's on the bench, all Switzerland's preparations go out the window.
Agree, agree. I,
Yeah.
I completely agree. And look, I think what we're talking about here in many ways is academic. I think Ali is 100% right. All the Portuguese planning and tactics is all around Ronaldo, right? But it would be a masterstroke if they went, we're going to play a false nine, we're going to play Diego Jota in there, we're going to start Bernardo Silva wide on the left, and he's going to
Yeah.
constantly change positions with Jota. I think it completely undoes any prep that the Swiss have done. It would be a masterstroke, but I don't think it happens.
That's actually a really interesting point, because I was just thinking about this. If Ronaldo's on the field, I'd almost, if I was Switzerland, I'd probably focus on shutting down Bruno Fernandes, because they're a different team when they're playing through Bruno, and it's to the point where I know that he looks. It's almost like they think he's going to pass it to Ronaldo, but then he doesn't. It's this complete
Yeah.
like this
Yeah.
mind screw heart, and if they shut him down, I don't think they have another player that's confident enough to be able to do that.
Agree.
Oh, I think Bernardo Silva would be up there. I think if he can get the ball to Bernardo can do. I think Bernardo can do what Ronaldo drops deeper, and then Bernardo and Felix and Rafael Leao running past. They've got like a bit of guile, a bit of pace, a bit of skill there as well. So
Yeah, but they haven't shown it. They haven't really done any of that in this World Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be great if that would be another masterstroke if they'd be able to pull that out in the Switzerland game, or maybe against Spain or Morocco. But past behaviour is an accurate representation of future behaviour.
Bruno, I feel, is the player who, in that bottom half of the draw, with with Spain in there, with England in there, with France in there, I think Bruno is the player that is he's your kind of he's your magician.
He's the
X factor, right? He is the guy in a tight little game, has the audacity to try something that no one else will.
change the result.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's infuriating at times, when United are 1-0 up and, we're 30 yards from our goal and he tries a back flick, but it's just the way Bruno is, right? He is, when it comes off, Bruno is unplayable. And like Kevin says, when he's in the zone, he's going to unpick any defense. Now, gentlemen, we're coming up to almost 50 minutes. We're going to wrap up with one final prediction from each of you. Does Marcus Rashford start? Kevin?
Which game are we talking about?
We're talking about the Senegal game tomorrow morning.
No, I don't think he starts against the Senegal game. I think he comes off the bench. But in whoever they play, I think he might start against France.
Ooh, wow! Up against Rafa Varane.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be brave enough to predict that far ahead from an England point of view. You've potentially got extra time and penalties to get through.
Mike, you're picking Poland to knock France out then.
Can I just come back to the Harry Kane thing quickly? Has Southgate backed himself into a corner with the fact Harry Kane's been everything's gone through Harry Kane over the past, and the time to start trying different things has probably been and gone, and maybe that's a challenge. And segueing back into Rashford, when you ask is he going to start, are we asking is he going to start over Harry Kane, or are you just asking is he going to start on the wing?
I don't think it's. I think Harry Kane is too like what Ollie was saying with Ronaldo. I think too central to everything. And actually, I think contrary to Ronaldo, I think Kane, when he isn't scoring, does have other strings to his bow. Right, his ability to pass, his especially when he drops deep and he's got runners running beyond.
Hmm.
And this is why I think if Kane has to start, it's critical that you start Saka and Rashford with him, because Kane, even when he's not scoring, has that ability to drop deep, draw
Mm.
defenders, and have runners go beyond. I would basically go with the same 11 that started against Iran, except instead of Sterling, I'd go Rashford.
Yeah,
Okay,
agreed.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually, yeah, for me, I would say with the caveat that Kane will start, the player who I would probably put in there would be Foden, just because he gives a bit of unpredictability to what Kane appears to be quite predictable at the moment. So that would be who I would go with. But yeah, as a more left field kind of choice, I would argue drop Kane completely and start Rashford up there. But
I
that's
love
not going to
this.
happen. So
Yeah, it's not gonna happen. Um, I think Gurpreet, my view on this. I've kind of already shared it. There's no way Rashford starts. Southgate is very conservative when it comes to knockout matches. He's very predictable when the tires hit the rubber. He likes to be like the formations and the combinations that he knows work and that can do a certain job for him. So that's what it's going to be. One of the interesting points of note as well is there's a large number of ex and current Chelsea strikers at this World Cup, just because they've gone through that many. A lot of them have actually gone back home. There's a couple still remaining, couple still around. I wonder if we're gonna see the back of them, and that one of them is Alvaro Morata in the Spanish team.
Oh. I reckon Mike made the point earlier when we're talking upsets. I reckon that Spain Morocco game is the one I've got penciled in as the most likely upset. Morocco, especially when they're playing that back five, I think they're looking good. They've got players in form. I think that is the result that I think yes, most likely upset in my opinion.
I think we should also highlight that if Japan get past Croatia, if Japan beat Croatia, they would have defeated two recent previous World Cup winners in Spain and Germany, and the last World Cup finals.
And again, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Japan don't beat Croatia simply because Croatia, I think, have the most press-resistant midfield in the tournament. They may not have the strike power up front, but a lot of Japan's game, I think, relies on putting that squeeze on in midfield, winning the ball quickly, and then getting the ball up front. I have a feeling that doesn't work against Croatia. I think Croatia play right past their press, and they probably put the most pressure on that Japanese back four, back five. Probably quite similar to what we saw Germany do in that first half in the
Yeah.
opening game. And I think I don't think lightning strikes twice. I think Croatia probably score early, and they end up winning 3-1 or 2-1. But the Spain
mm,
Morocco game, I think, is I look at that game and it, if Morocco can get through the first 20-30 minutes like Aussie got through against Argentina,
Mm.
when Morocco start to come forward, I think that Spanish defense looks a lot more leaky than what we all thought after the first game.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, that's all we've got time for. Thank you to the listener for listening in. We will be back next week, by which stage more than half of the teams left remaining in this tournament would have gone home, including more former Chelsea strikers. We
I feel outnumbered today.
you can
There's just so
you can
many
blame,
of them.
You can blame Siobhan for that, Mike, who was off on holiday, like so many of said Chelsea strikers. We'll leave it there, and we will catch you next week. Thank you.